I've never seen woodland quite like this before.
I've come to the Isle of Wight to explore the seldom seen wilder side to the island. And already looking at the woodland, I can see it's quite different to the mainland. The undergrowth underneath the canopy is much thicker, and that's really exciting because that's habitat holding all sorts of wildlife. I can't wait to explore it.
In this series, I'm visiting some of Britain's most outstanding areas of natural beauty to discover the fascinating wildlife that has made these places their home. This time, I'm exploring the ancient woodlands on the Isle of Wight. Ancient woodland is defined as land that has been continually wooded since 1600. It's home to more of our threatened species than any other British habitat. While I'm here, I'm going to focus on finding Britain's rarest newt.
If we turn her over, what a beautiful pattern.
Seek out the endangered dormouse and try to catch a glimpse of the nimble red squirrel. The Isle of Wight lies 4 miles off the south coast of England. Isolated from the mainland and with no deer to clear the undergrowth and no grey squirrels, the woodland here is a refuge for many of our iconic British mammals.
I've come down here into this wood to look for red squirrels. It's one of the things that the Isle of Wight is famous for. But it's very, very quiet here at the moment. A few moments ago I saw just a glimpse of a buzzard going across the canopy. And I think they've been hunted this morning. I think that buzzard is stalking squirrels because there's a real sense of everything is hyper alert. There are a lot of birds here not moving at the moment, just sitting still. It'll pass, but I think we've walked into a drama unfolding. It's one of those things that happens in nature, in forests particularly, that you can walk by and never notice until you start to look for specific behaviour of the animals with more detail. There's a palpable atmosphere here.
I'm here in spring, which is also the toughest time of year for finding food. With their winter nut supplies gone and seeds yet to appear on the trees, red squirrels are forced high into the canopy to feed.
Yeah. Like that, there he is there. But isn't he beautiful? That is a fantastic sight. Our native red squirrel in deciduous woodland. That's a rare thing to see in Britain. Normally now you find the red squirrels confined to areas where it's mostly conifers. And of course you read in the books that they like to eat green pine cones. So what do they find to eat here in the deciduous forest? Well, this squirrel is searching, and every now and then a little bit of what the squirrel's interested in is falling to the ground. You see there's an oak leaf there, but this is what it's eating. It's the pollen on these oak catkins. It's a lot of work. It's having to move from catkin to catkin throughout the tree, whilst keeping a weather eye out for the buzzard that's hunting higher above.
There are an estimated 3,500 red squirrels on the Isle of Wight.
They survive here because they're on an island. It would be a disaster if grey squirrels were to find their way onto the Isle of Wight because they bring with them disease and they can outcompete the squirrel. That's the old story. There's a sense of belonging. Maybe that's just something I'm feeling inside, but that's my reaction when I watch him in the deciduous tree there. I think that sight alone is worth coming to the Isle of Wight for. To see a red squirrel in our native woodland, it's magic. The fragrance in here is wonderful. These are all truly native bluebells, absolutely lovely, and they're doing so well this year because it's been cold and the leaves have been slow to set, so there's been a good wash of sunlight on the floor here. But I'd like to show you this. This is a coppice stool, and at the base here you can see there was quite a large hazel tree growing, and the foresters have cut it back, and that was quite a large tree when it was cut, and as such it had a good root supply here, lots of energy in it, which is now representing itself in these young shoots that are growing vigorously from the base. And they'll be allowed to grow until they're the size that the woodsman wants, and then they'll be cut again. And so the process will repeat itself. And one of the really joyous aspects of coppicing is that every few years you expose the forest floor to sunlight. And what that does, that sunlight bathing the forest floor, causes seeds to germinate and wonderful flowers to come up. You can see here we've got some marvellous things. This little white plant here, that's pignut. And at the base of this root, there's an edible tuber just waiting to be eaten. It's delicious. This is the narrow-leaved lungwort. Now, if I pick one of the leaves, you can see that it's got little flecks on it. And it gets its name because that reminded people of phlegm, like somebody had coughed onto the leaf. And back in the 17th century, people believed in something called the doctrine of signatures. And this concept was that plants in some way demonstrated to an observer what they could be used to treat. So walnuts looked like a brain, so they were used for brain disorders. And lungwort, because it had phlegm-like marks on the leaves, was believed to be good for bronchial disorders. I'm not sure it holds water, but it's a beautiful plant to see nonetheless. The ideal coppice woodland is a mosaic of different patches cut at different times, so that you get this natural progression of flowers and habitats, food sources and shelter for different species. Now, all of this coppice that's taking place here is being done by conservationists for the benefit of one endangered species, the dormouse. Ian, what have you got here then?
We've been checking over 560 boxes in the woodlands over this weekend, and we think we've got a dormouse in this one, so we're just going to take it down and have a look.
Ian Wight from the People's Trust for Endangered Species has been monitoring the island's dormice for 5 years.
They are charming, aren't they?
They are lovely animals. It's got a very typical nest full of green leaves which will cut on the tree. Actually looks like a bit of a damaged eye there. Just take
oh yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
So we'll just take him off there. I've rolled my sleeves up so he can't easily climb up my arm. And we just want to get the sex. Oh, it's a male there. Having sexed him, and pop him in a weigh bag to get a weight of him and see how healthy he is.
In professional hands, the temporary weighing bag won't harm the dormouse.
Looks fine apart from that eye.
Well, obviously they eat hazelnuts in the autumn, but what are they eating at this time of year?
They lack a cecum in the gut, which means they can't digest sort of leaves and cellulose, so they tend to need high-grade foods. They tend to feed on pollen and nectar in plants, and which means a woodland like this, the coppice is cut at different stages. Actually, there's different plants coming in, which means there's quite good diversity in quite a small area.
So basically, you need an area of coppice large enough that you'll have a mosaic of rotation, so that every year there are going to be some flowers somewhere for
Absolutely.
them. So we better find out what it weighs then.
Weighing in at 25 grams, and just have to take the weight of the bag off, which I think is about 5 grams, so it looks like about 20 grams.
20 grams, tiny.
I think, yes.
But I guess with one eye, he's at quite a disadvantage.
Yeah, he is,
because obviously an area like this is going to be a home for owls, and it'd be prime food, really.
Possibly, but to be honest, very rarely do almost turn up in owl pellets. And because they live at such low densities, nothing really specialises on feeding with them. If you've got an ideal habitat around, then basically it means the population generally is good.
Yeah. Marvellous.
Ancient woodland covers just 2% of Britain, but here, on the Isle of Wight, it accounts for almost half of the island's woodland. Cut off from the mainland, the absence of deer ensures an unusually dense undergrowth.
Can you hear that? That's the sound of young chicks. And those are the chicks of a woodpecker. You can see the hole further up. It's quite a distinctive sound. Now, the best way to get a view of them returning to the nest site is to use a little bit of camouflage. It causes the birds less distress, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. This is a great old camouflage net. What I've done is in the corners, 2 of the corners, I've put a wooden peg, like that little hook made of wood. And that makes it very easy to very quickly set it up. I'm going to put a cap on as well, so that there's less shine from my face. Just sit patiently.
Great spotted woodpeckers excavate a new nest hole in an old tree every year.
Here we go, here we go. And that's a female.
The female lays a single clutch of 4 to 7 eggs.
She's collecting food in these tall pine trees, and they have this tongue that will extend 4 centimetres outside of the bill. So it can reach out like, it's like a dart. On the end of it, it's hard, and it can pierce a grub and bring it back into the mouth. And if that doesn't work, then on the outside of the tongue, it's got sticky saliva and little spines, so it's like a rasp. Snatch onto things. Here we go. It's the female. Oh, and it's the male. You can see the male because it's got a red flash on the back of its head. It's nice to see him come to the nest. I was thinking for a moment he might have been neglecting his parental duties, but he had the most humongous bill full of insects there. Fantastic. And he carried out the fecal sac as he left. So he's keeping the nest clean as well. Wonderful to have the opportunity to observe these things first-hand and close to in this way.
Dense woodland holds many wildlife secrets. It's amazing what you can see if you know what to look for.
You can tell almost at one glance that there are badgers here. First thing is lots of elderberry trees. There are always elderberry trees where there are badgers. And then the other is that these trails going through the undergrowth here. See these broad, wide, well-brushed trails. That's because badgers have got such long fur. It is like it's almost like a walking wallpaper brush as it goes through here. There's a badger hole. There's a lot of activity here. A lot of fresh digging just here. I think this is probably a good place to put up a trail camera.
Badgers are mostly nocturnal, and with multiple entrances to this set, it's hard to know which is the best place for the camera trap. I found what I hope is the best position, but nature has an uncanny knack of surprising you. The Isle of Wight forests are home to another creature that uses the cover of night and the thick vegetation to make its way through the woodland. Newts are commonly thought of as pond dwellers, but they actually spend most of their time on land and only live in ponds during the breeding season. In a forest clearing, I'm meeting Richard Grogan from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, who is licensed to lay bottle traps in areas which might be home to the protected great crested newt. We're going to identify what's been caught overnight.
Look at that one. So, if you want to know your newts, the first thing to do is to look at the back feet. And if they're black, webbed feet, then that's a male palmate newt. But these aren't, so this one's a female. So what you have to do is you turn her over and look at the chin. And if the chin has spots on, it's a smooth newt. So spots and smooth. And if it doesn't, it's a palmate newt. So that is a female palmate newt.
So how are newts in Britain doing at the moment?
Well, we have 3 native species, the palmate, the smooth and the great crested newt. On the Isle of Wight, the palmate's the most common, the smooth less so, and the great crested newt is very uncommon, not only on the Isle of Wight, but in Britain and also in Europe.
So what's the breeding season for newts?
They come out of hibernation in around about April time. They immediately go into a pond, start looking for mates, start breeding, and will carry on until September time, when they'll start looking to hibernate.
In the winter, you roll logs back. Sometimes you come across them where they've tucked themselves away.
That's right, they have to keep their skin damp. So wherever they are, they need to be in wet grass, they need to be in ponds or under stones, under rocks, somewhere that will remain humid and damp.
So this is the ideal circumstance, isn't it? We've got a pond here. It's in the middle of a forest.
Yes, because we have no deer on the island, the undergrowth grows very rapidly, and that can provide cover very quickly for these animals. So here you can see a female palmate newt, that's what's named a gravid, full of eggs. So these eggs are laid singularly on vegetation floating on the surface of the water. Then of course they hatch, produce little newtlets, which then live a bit of time in the pond, grow, and eventually find somewhere to hibernate.
Shall we try another trap?
Yeah, shall we go and have a look, see what else we've caught? Here we are, Ray.
Ah, one of the big ones.
Different for you.
Yeah.
She'd like to bring with one of the others out.
So we've got a male and a female palmate newt here for comparison.
And this is a female
Great crested
newt.
Look at the size difference.
Or warty newt. You can see lots of bumps on her skin. She doesn't have the crest. And the crest folds over, but you can still see it as a flap of skin. And if we turn her over...
What a beautiful pattern.
And that's as distinctive as a fingerprint. And we think it's used for display. So the male will arch its back right up and display the chest underneath, you know, a bit like a robin's red breast.
Right, well, I'm going to set them free. Here goes the great crested. Away! And away they go. Without deer trails, it's almost impossible to move silently through these woods. But this dense vegetation has benefits. It's fantastic habitat for small mammals. All the way through here, there should be wood mice, dormice, voles, and of course, the small mammal predators, weasels and stoats.
I'm on my way back to the badger set as the camera trap has been triggered earlier than expected. Badgers are rarely seen in daylight, but this one is out at 4 p.m. But the camera has captured not just one badger, but 2, then 3, and wait for it, 4 badgers. With this much activity in daylight, it's definitely worth finding a good position and hoping that I get lucky. earthworms make up 50% of a badger's diet. Powerful limbs and long claws make light work of turning over the soil.
Isn't that amazing? I don't need a binocular. I've really been surprised by the Isle of Wight. With no deer here, the understory in the woods is so thick that there's the opportunity to see species that would otherwise be difficult to see on the mainland. I don't know why people go overseas to watch wildlife. It's so brilliant in Britain.